welcome to Research Roundtable. I'm Annette Brown, Principal Economist here at FHI 360. Today I'm talking with my colleague, Wael Moussa. Wael and his co-authors, Yvonne Cao and Natalie Luge, recently conducted an impact evaluation of the Mahai Mamaki Teni project in Madagascar, and we're going to talk a little bit about that study today.
All right, thank you, Annette.
Great. So, Wael, why don't you start us off by telling us what the research question for this study was?
Sure. The research question for this study is fairly straightforward in the sense of we're evaluating whether or not this first grade reading intervention works.
Mm-hmm.
And the nice thing about this study is that actually it had a sub-research question, which is, well, what components of this intervention really work and which components don't?
Great. So let's start by talking a bit about the program itself. What was this early grade reading program?
So this early grade reading program is a fairly standard USAID early grade reading intervention in the sense of it follows the same structure across different contexts. But the main difference is that the context of the Madagascar reading program is definitely contextualized for the local context.
Great. And so in this program, are you working directly with students? You're working with teachers?
So in this program, we're working directly with teachers and providing them with teacher professional development as well as support for their lessons as well as their lesson planning.
Okay. So one of the reasons why this is powerful as an evaluation is because you were able to use randomized assignment. So you were able to randomly assign some schools into receiving the program and others into a comparison group. What allowed you to do that?
Basically, it was the Ministry of Education in Madagascar. They were interested in finding out what is the causal effect of this intervention and whether or not this intervention can scale to the national level. And so jointly with the Ministry of Education, we were able to figure out how best to implement this experiment. And with their guidance, we were able to figure out that we could do this experiment in two main regions in Madagascar and then basically measure whether or not this intervention actually works.
That's great that you were working so closely with them on this.
Yeah.
So, and then another thing that enables you to really measure a change here is because you're using this tool called the EGRA, right? Early Grade Reading Assessment.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding is that that's used around the world. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, especially in the USAID early grade reading world, it's a fairly standard tool basically to measure how well a student or a child can read in the context of their appropriate grade level.
Okay. So you had random assignment into program schools and control schools, and then you were measuring before and after with the EGRA.
That's right.
What did you find?
Basically, what we found was that the schools that implemented this intervention, their students exhibited gains in their reading ability by 20 to 35% of a standard deviation.
And that's after only 3 months?
That's right.
Wow. So that sounds really good to academics who think in terms of standard deviations, but how would you benchmark that result for somebody from the Ministry of Finance?
So basically, in the context of Madagascar especially, at baseline we found that almost 40% of first graders could not read a single word.
Wow.
And following this program, we found that percentage decreased down to 30%.
Wow.
So that's basically a 10 percentage point improvement.
Yeah, so meaningful change. One of the things that I found really interesting about this study is what you might think of as a study within a study, which is in addition to collecting this outcome data on student reading, you were also collecting data about teachers in the classroom.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about those data and how you were able to analyze them.
So the data, like you said, we were trying to unpack a little bit the black box behind this intervention, and because it's also a coaching-centered intervention, the coaches were actually collecting classroom observation data.
So these are teacher coaches?
Right, teacher coaches. And of the data that they collected were basically information on whether or not the teachers are following the intervention as designed. For example, we asked coaches to record whether or not the teachers were following the lesson scripts, for example, or to let us know if they are on track with the lesson schedule as well.
Great. And so what did you find?
Basically, what we found was that the teachers who do follow the lesson scripts closely, and in this case, it means following a three-step process, which corresponds to an I do, we do, you do process. Basically, where the teachers first demonstrate the lesson to the students, then they practice it with the students in a group, and then the students practice that on their own. And we
Right.
found that classrooms that do follow this process more closely actually provide much higher reading gains than those who didn't.
Great. So it's not a surprising finding, but it's great to have solid evidence to back up what we would believe to be true.
Yes, at least this confirms it.
That it makes a difference. But I think then it's important to keep in mind that the as you said, the program was partly the way you were teaching teachers to teach reading, but also this coaching element, so that you had people in the classroom on a regular basis as well.
That's exactly right.
Observing the teachers. Great. So when you talked to the Ministry of Education after you finished the study, what findings did you highlight for them?
The main objective for the ministry is to get their children to read, especially at an early stage, and we were able to provide them with that evidence that now you have 70% of your children are able to read, whereas before it was a lot less than that.
Right. And what are they doing with that evidence?
So now, getting the results from our evaluation, they were basically able to refine and make adjustments to the intervention itself, because we did find some things work better than others, and scale it up to the national scale.
So that's great. So you were able, through this one study, to really make a meaningful change to education policy in Madagascar.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, this is a really interesting study, Wael. Thank you. So this is Annette Brown and Wael Moussa, and we thank you for joining us here at Research Roundtable.